When HOA President Karen Whitmore carved the word traitor into my front door after I exposed her tyrannical reign of terror, I thought that was rock bottom. But then I discovered she'd secretly gambled away our entire neighborhood using our homes as collateral for her personal debts, threatening to make dozens of senior citizens homeless while she pocketed thousands in fraudulent fines. What started as a 71-year-old widower just trying to find peace after losing his wife became an all-out war that would expose the most twisted HOA scam you've ever heard. And when Karen finally snapped in front of cameras at that community meeting, well, let's just say her meltdown became the evidence that brought down her entire criminal empire. My name is Ray Holloway, and by the time I met Karen Whitmore, I was already pretty used to being invisible. I don't say that with bitterness. It's just what happens when you grow older. I'm 71 now. My wife passed last year. Lung cancer took her fast and quiet. Evelyn was the only woman I ever loved. We were married 42 years, never had kids. She used to say we had too much love between us to share it properly with anyone else. We didn't need more. We had each other. And then, just like that, I had no one. After she was gone, I stayed in our old place for a while, but the silence was too heavy. Every creak in the floorboards sounded like a goodbye. Her chair stayed empty. Her perfume, Chanel No. 5, lingered in the sheets long after the hospice nurse took them away. I stopped sleeping in our bedroom. I ate standing up. I stopped answering the phone. I think people gave up on me. That's fair. I gave up on me too for a while. I used to go entire days without speaking. The only sound in the house came from the fridge humming or the mail sliding through the door. I got used to that kind of quiet, the kind that makes you forget you're alive. You don't realize it when it happens, but grief wears you down like water on stone, one drop at a time, day after day. My friends, what few I had left, kept calling at first, left voicemails, knocked. But you can only reach out to someone who's retreating into themselves so many times before you start to take the hint. I never blamed them. I just didn't have the words. I couldn't tell anyone what it felt like to eat breakfast in silence when you used to have someone across the table smiling back at you with jam on her lip. Evelyn always made too much toast. She said leftovers were for the birds. Even now, I sometimes catch myself slicing 4 pieces of bread instead of 2. When she got sick, I stopped playing guitar. I used to play a little. Nothing fancy, mostly old folk songs and war-era ballads. After Evelyn passed, the strings sat untouched in the corner like a memory I wasn't ready to confront. I stopped shaving every day. I stopped making coffee in the morning. There were mornings I didn't even remember waking up. I'd just find myself sitting in the dark holding one of her slippers, not sure how I got there. But one morning I walked outside and the wind chimes Evelyn loved had caught a breeze and played this little tune we both used to hum along to. That sound broke something open in me. It was like she reached across from whatever place she was now and gave me one gentle nudge. I stood on the porch and cried until my shirt was soaked. Then I went inside, packed 2 suitcases, sold the house, and moved to Pine Grove Villas. I thought if I couldn't find joy again, maybe I could at least find quiet, peace, a patch of earth to sit on and feel the sun. What I got instead was Karen. I'll never forget the first time I saw her. It was a Tuesday morning. The kind where the sun is just a little too cheerful for how you feel inside. I was watering the azaleas Evelyn loved. I planted them exactly the way she would have, tight clusters under the front window, just enough distance between them to let the roots breathe. I remember wiping my hands on my jeans and taking in the smell of the earth. And then I heard it. Click, click, click. The sound of heels, sharp, deliberate, not walking, patrolling. I turned my head and there she was, Karen Whitmore, HOA president of Pine Grove. Her entire appearance screamed control. She had short silver hair, cut in a bob so crisp it could have been measured with a ruler. Not a strand out of place. She wore a fitted beige blazer with padded shoulders, the kind of outfit that tried to say, "I'm professional," even though she hadn't held a job in 20 years. Her skirt clung to her narrow hips like it was vacuum sealed. Her skin was pale, almost waxy, and her lipstick matched her nails, a washed-out rose that reminded me of dried blood on porcelain. She had these narrow blue eyes, set close, that darted from my face to the flower bed to my boots. Her gaze didn't settle. It scanned, judged, calculated. Her neck stiffened every time she looked at something she didn't approve of, like my old army cap or the scratch on my mailbox. And there was this tightness to her mouth, like she was always on the verge of correcting you. Her whole face was pulled inward, like the years had drawn every ounce of joy out of her. She looked like the kind of woman who sighed loudly when someone took too long at the post office, who watched her neighbors with binoculars and wrote notes in the margins of rule books. There was no softness to her, no warmth, just a brittle kind of pride that came from policing other people. She carried her clipboard like a sheriff's badge and spoke like she was reciting bylaws in her sleep. "You must be the new homeowner," she said, arms crossed, voice like she was reading off a courtroom transcript. "Mr. Holloway, is it?" I nodded. "That's right." She didn't offer a handshake. Just stepped closer to the flower bed and tilted her head in mock concern. "I see you've used Sierra Brown mulch." I looked at the flower bed. "Yeah, they had it on sale at the nursery." "Well," she said, flipping a page on the clipboard she carried like a badge, "Pine Grove only allows pine bark red. It's all clearly laid out in the covenant packet." I squinted at her. "Covenant packet?" She smiled then, but it wasn't a smile. It was more like the human version of a warning label. "You did receive a welcome binder when you closed, correct?" "Probably. Haven't read it yet." "Well," she said again, louder this time, "you'll want to do that. We take appearance very seriously here. Consistency preserves property values." And just like that, she turned on her heel and walked off, her shoes hammering the concrete like gavel strikes. I stood there, hose in hand, stunned by the speed and coldness of it all, like I'd just been through a surprise inspection I didn't know I signed up for. I stood still long after she vanished down the street, water pooling at my feet, the azaleas dripping like they'd overheard everything. The next morning, I found an envelope taped to my front door. Inside was an official-looking notice printed on letterhead with Karen's name at the bottom. It read, "Notice of non-compliance, unauthorized mulch color. Failure to correct within 72 hours may result in daily fines." It was my 5th day in the neighborhood. I stood there holding that letter and something inside me cracked. Not loudly, but sharp. I thought about all the things I had done to hold my life together after Evelyn passed. All the nights I sat alone with a blanket she crocheted and begged God to give me one more hour with her. All the ways I tried to find a new rhythm without her in it. And now, here I was, being fined for dirt. I looked around. No one else had been sighted. I saw plastic flamingos, garden gnomes, even a neighbor's faded Trump flag waving from their porch. But I was the one getting written up. I, who hadn't even finished unpacking, who still smelled Evelyn's shampoo every time I opened a box. I, who still hadn't thrown away her toothbrush. I walked to the trash can, held the letter over it, and stopped. No, this wasn't about the mulch. This was about Karen, about whatever broken piece of her needed to remind people she was in charge. And me? I was just the unlucky target of the week. I went inside, sat down in Evelyn's old recliner, and felt the quiet crawl all over me again. And for the first time since her funeral, I got angry. Not sad, not tired, angry. It wasn't rage. It was colder than that. Steadier. Like a door finally creaking open after being shut too long. That was the moment I realized something. You can move houses. You can change towns. You can surround yourself with silence and good intentions. But some people like Karen, will always find you. And when they do, they don't ask questions. They enforce. So I remulched. That's what you do, right? You compromise. I took down the wind chimes Evelyn had left me, even though they were the only thing that made the nights less empty. I measured my trash bins and placed them exactly 3 feet from the curb. I started waking up early just to mow my lawn in stripes like the neighbors did. I even bought a regulation mailbox because mine had too much character. I did it all. And for what? So Karen could leave me alone. But she didn't. And that was only the beginning. It didn't take long before the notices became ritual, the kind that ruins a morning before the kettle even whistles. At precisely 8:07 a.m., every single Friday, a new envelope appeared on my storm door, taped so aggressively the paint came off in brittle flakes when I pulled it free. The first 2 violations almost made me laugh from the absurdity. Garden hose must be stored in a coiled configuration of less than 24 inches in diameter, and unsuitably casual footwear, meaning my scuffed work boots, left on porch rail. After dusk constitute visual clutter. By week 3, the humor curdled. The constant drip-drip of criticism gnawed at me like termites and joists. I'd wake before sunrise with a knot in my stomach, scan the yard through blinds, whispering a half-hearted prayer that today she'd forget. She never did. Paper may be light, but paper cuts deep, especially when every sheet feels like a public shaming pinned to your front door. The fines stung, sure, but what really burned was the sense of being watched, hunted, told in writing that I didn't fit the pristine postcard lodged in Karen's head. Patterns emerged. Karen always delivered the notices herself. Never the mailman, never another board member. She needed to be seen in the act. She'd idle her silver Lexus 2 houses down, step out in those 5-inch nude pumps, march up the sidewalk like an auditor on inspection day, position the envelope with surgical precision, exactly 2 inches below the brass knocker, then step back to photograph her handiwork from 3 angles as if documenting evidence for the Supreme Court. In the reflection of the glass, I sometimes caught her lips pressed together, a tiny cat-butt pucker, like my existence tasted sour on her tongue. At first I cowered behind the curtains, heart hammering like a trapped sparrow. Eventually, I started filming. A dusty dash cam salvaged from Evelyn's old Corolla did the trick. I suction-cupped it to the bay window, kept a thumb drive ready, and hit record the moment I heard heels ticking like a metronome on concrete. The footage felt like armor, proof that I wasn't sinking into paranoia. Nights were the worst. I'd sit in the living room with the TV muted, blue glow flickering across half-unpacked boxes, and wait for my pulse to slow. Sometimes I'd thumb the guitar strings, still perfectly in tune, but never dare play. Music felt like a one-way ticket back to grief. Instead, I reread Evelyn's letters until the page blurred, her steady loops of ink waiting behind tears. She always signed off, "Find the good, Ray, it's still out there." I tried, Evie. God knows I tried. The 4th Friday brought a $300 citation for non-compliant ambient illumination. Translation, my porch bulb said soft white instead of warm white. That night, something in me shifted. Not an explosion, but a quiet, deliberate click like a safety switching off. I shrugged on my old field jacket, grabbed a flashlight and clipboard, and paced every inch of Pine Grove. Kids' bikes sprawled on lawns, plastic pumpkins still rotting since Halloween, flags faded to pink, patio chairs stacked like junkyard bones. I itemized each offense until my hand cramped. By the time I circled back home, the clipboard pages felt heavier than the rifle I'd carried in basic. At dawn, I folded the list, slid it under Karen's oak door, rang her bell like I was reviving the dead, then strolled away whistling the army cadence Evelyn used to tease me about. Petty? Probably. Necessary? Absolutely. Bullies respect only pushback. She showed up on my porch an hour later, clipboard clutched like a riot shield, mask of calm cracking at the edges. She didn't bother to knock. She inhaled, perfume blooming in a cloud of lilac and mothballs. "Mr. Holloway," she said, each syllable dipped in ice. "Are you harassing your neighbors?" I crossed my arms. "Just applying community standards evenly. Isn't that your motto?" Her smile could have frost-burned concrete. "Your tone is inappropriate. I will be filing a report for hostile conduct and intimidation." Hostile conduct. The phrase rattled inside my skull like bolts in a dryer. I'd delivered mail through riots, taken orders from colonels who'd never smelled cordite, held Evelyn's hand while chemo ravaged her veins, yet nothing made me feel as small as that clipboard. The neighbors felt it too. George Myers, 2 doors down, waved me over while topping off his feeder. "She fined me $250, he whispered, glancing at Karen's windows like they had ears. "Claims birdseed attracts rodents. Been feeding cardinals since 05. Across the street, 83-year-old Mrs. Thomason confessed her ceramic gnome vanished the same afternoon she received a warning for tasteless lawn figurines. She'd found it smashed in the HOA dumpster, red hat in porcelain shards. Stories multiplied. A young couple on Elm Court fined for sidewalk chalk. A Vietnam vet cited for flying a slightly faded flag. A widow ordered to repaint her shutters because sage green lacks cohesion. It wasn't enforcement. It was intimidation wrapped in bureaucracy. A quiet coalition formed, First 5 of us, then 10, then 15, meeting in my garage after sunset on folding chairs rescued from curbside trash. The space smelled of motor oil and stale sugar packets, overhead bulb humming like a tired bee. We passed letters around, highlighted contradictions, tallied fines. For the first time since Evelyn's funeral, I felt useful. Not alive exactly, but enlisted. We assigned tasks. George handled evidence cataloging. Mrs. Thomason's grandniece, a legal clinic intern, drafted grievances. I plotted graphs showing fines per household since Karen's regime began, more penalties in 8 months than the previous 6 years combined. Each data point felt like a drumbeat. One Tuesday, just before dusk, I spotted Karen across the street photographing chalk art on Mrs. Lau's drive, crooked suns and hopscotch boxes drawn by 8-year-old twins visiting from Tallahassee. Their laughter floated in humid air while Karen zoomed her phone like she'd uncovered vandalism. Something ancient stirred in my chest, a memory of drill field grit, that moment you plant your boots and refuse to budge. I stepped onto the sidewalk. Karen stiffened, eyes narrowing behind half-moon glasses, phone raised like a weapon. I crossed the asphalt slow, deliberate. Heat shimmered off the tar. Her perfume, overripe lilac, swirled between us. "Recording public spaces is my right," she declared, voice pitched high so the children could hear she was important. "Great," I said, tone low as Riverstone. "So is speaking in them." From under my arm, I produced a fat manila folder, over 100 pages now, stuffed with grievances, photos, timestamps. "You know what this is?" Her gaze flicked to the folder. "Irrelevant paperwork." A laugh punched out of me, raw, real, the first laugh since Evie breathed her last. "It's evidence, Karen. Harassment, property damage, selective enforcement. Dreams you strangled because they didn't match your paint chip palette." I fanned the photos. Her ripping George's feeder out by the roots. Her lugging the gnome to the dumpster at 12:37 a.m. Her flashlight probing gutters, measuring tape spanning. My trash bins. Color drained from her cheeks so fast it looked painful. "You're trespassing on HOA jurisdiction," she croaked. I stepped closer, folder a shield between us. "You drape bylaws over your shoulders like armor, but armor cracks." I tapped the glossy prints. "We're filing a class grievance. If the board buries it, we go to the Ledger, Channel 6, the Senior Sentinel, every outlet that loves a David and Goliath story, especially when Goliath wears kitten heels and a beige blazer." She swallowed. For one bare second, I saw the human beneath, tired, brittle, but the mask snapped back. "You'll regret this," she rasped, voice thin as tracing paper. "Maybe," I said, "but I've regretted worse." I pivoted away, leaving her ankle-deep in pastel chalk suns while the twins giggled like victory bells. That night, the garage buzzed like a power station. Even the neutral neighbors filed in, clutching crumpled citations, cheeks flushed with adrenaline. George rigged a projector from a thrift store laptop. The whitewashed back wall became a theater of Karen's misdeeds. We practiced testimonies, rehearsed parliamentary procedure, assigned speaking slots for the next board meeting. Someone brewed burnt coffee strong enough to melt rust. Between stapling packets and refilling styrofoam cups, Mrs. Thomason noticed the guitar in the corner. Her eyes, usually watery with age, brightened. "Play us something, Ray." I hadn't touched it in almost 2 years, but her plea felt like a command from a higher rank. I tuned the strings, calluses gone, fingertips tender, and strummed a hesitant G chord. Sound filled the concrete box, bounced off mower blades and paint cans, settled warm on our shoulders. George tapped a spoon on his thermos for rhythm. Somebody hummed, "This land is your land." For 3 full minutes, Pine Grove became the community the glossy brochure had promised. After everyone drifted home, I stayed, plucking chords until the clock nudged midnight. In the hush, I could almost feel Evelyn's hand on my shoulder, hum stitched with love and slightly off-key pitch. Tears welled, clean tears, not soaked in grief, tears of motion. At 2 a.m., I checked the porch camera once more before bed. Karen's Lexus idled at the cul-de-sac, headlights dark. Through the lens, I saw her silhouette, phone glow painting her face ghost blue. Watching, recording, plotting moves on our little neighborhood chessboard. I smiled into the dark. She didn't scare me anymore, War had lines now, clear, bright, undeniable. And I, the invisible widower, had rediscovered mission. Bullies in beige come and go, but a street that learns to stand shoulder to shoulder. That song doesn't end with a citation. That tune gets louder with every voice, every guitar string, until even the finest shutters can't keep the harmony out. Sleep came in tatters after that night, shredded by the blue pulse of Karen's Lexus idling at the cul-de-sac like a wolf at the tree line. Every hour I jolted up, squinting through blinds at that squat silhouette. Headlights blacked out, engine humming low enough to feel in my bones. By first light, the sedan was gone, but twin arcs of burnt rubber still claw-marked the pavement. I brewed coffee so strong it slapped me awake, shuffled to the porch, and re-watched the security feed. 52 minutes of Karen motionless behind the wheel, phone glow flickering across her face, thumb tapping like a metronome. Intimidation as performance art. Tuesday bled into Wednesday under a dome of sticky heat and restless cicadas. Just before dawn, neon yellow flyers bloomed on every mailbox. Emergency HOA meeting. Thursday, 6 p.m., Community Hall. The printed agenda mumbled about budget reallocations, but everybody in Pine Grove knew the headliner was Karen. By noon, rumor sprouted legs. Cassidy Rayburn of the St. John's Ledger had left sharp-voiced voicemails for half the neighborhood. George described her as a reporter who smells smoke and keeps pouring gasoline. Our garage morphed into a war room. Evidence printers coughed until toner faded to gray. We fed them fresh cartridges like ammo belts. George laminated timelines with a cranky thrift store machine, complaining that unlaminated paper looked too apologetic. Mrs. Thomason rehearsed her speech to the lawnmower, swapping oxygen tank cannulas between paragraphs. Even reserved Mr. Diaz, English limited to yes sir kindness, drilled a single crystalline phrase, "We just want kindness." By Thursday afternoon, thunderheads stacked over the marsh like bruises. At 5:30 on the dot, Pine Grove's lot clogged with Hondas, walkers, 2 mobility scooters, and a Vietnam-era Ford pickup flying a tattered POW flag. The community hall smelled of old coffee and floor wax. Folding chairs formed a wary horseshoe around a faux linen-draped table. A plastic ficus sagged in the corner as if anticipating shrapnel. Karen sat dead center, beige blazer knife-creased, tablet screen glowing toxic blue. She tapped a miniature gavel, her personal prop, against a Waterford glass as though warming up an orchestra of pain. Roger, our soft-spoken treasurer, attempted the Pledge of Allegiance, but Karen bulldozed him. Agenda Item 1, escalating hostility toward board authority, requires immediate disciplinary discussion. She brandished a folder thin as a tourist map, labeled Harassment Dossier, then speared me with an ice-pick stare. George's cue. Lights dimmed. Our salvage yard projector beamed across a wrinkled bedsheet. Slide 1. Karen ripping his cedar bird feeder, hunched like a vulture. Collective gasp. Slide 2. A smashed gnome, cap shards sparkling. Slide 3. Karen in bathrobe at 2:17 a.m., stretching a tape between my trash bins and curb like a bomb tech. Karen bleached white, then flashed crimson. These images are maliciously edited. Mrs. Lau, 5'0", rose, calm as a librarian. Edited to teleport you? Laughter scuttled over linoleum. In came testimonies, a storm of small sorrows. Mr. Diaz raised a crumpled citation for sidewalk chalk. My grandchildren draw sun. She call police. Mrs. Tenwick, oxygen hissing, displayed a $600 repaint invoice. She said my sage shutters looked morbid. The Tallahassee twins, 8 years old, clutching pastel sticks. Miss Karen yelled that kids' art makes the street look poor. Karen's facade fissured. She demanded fines for slander. Silence. Roger's eyes fluttered like trapped moths. The hush ignited. Karen slammed her toy gavel. The stem snapped. Shards ricocheted. You ingrates don't understand order, she thundered, voice scraping lights. She ripped the projector cord. Truth blinked out. Evidence sheets, USB drives, even Roger's donut exploded off the table as her arm swept wide. She shoved Roger. His bifocals skittered, crunching under heels. Phones sprouted, red dot blinking eyes. Karen, hair uncoiling, stockings laddered, screamed, I am Pine Grove. I am the bylaws. I held your home values above water while you drooled in rocking chairs. She jabbed at neighbors, oxygen tanks, chalk-stained hands, branding them parasites, vandals, deadweight. She seized George's laminated timeline, flung it like a discus. It clipped Cassidy's camera, lens wobbling. Security, 2 retired Marines, advanced. Karen stumbled, one heel snapping, knees cracking linoleum. She clawed door frames, leaving faint blood crescents, spit flying. "You'll eat each other alive without me!" Her voice pitched feral. As they dragged her backward, she ripped a chunk of ficus plastic leaves free and hurled it like confetti. One shoe gone, blazer flapping, she shrieked, "You—" a finger straight at me. "Have no idea what you started!" Doors boomed shut like iron vaults, muffling her animal yell that slithered down the corridor. Air returned in gasps. Roger, cheeks blotched, reclaimed the official gavel. "Motion to suspend Karen Whitmore pending investigation." Hands shot up, a tidal surge. Crack, passed. Outside, thunder finally burst, rain needling asphalt while neighbors clustered under shared umbrellas. I should have felt victorious. Instead, a cold thread crawled my spine. Cornered predators don't retreat. They recalibrate. 2 nights later, I got proof. Returning from a garage council at 12:40 a.m., my throat raw from drafting affidavits, I found my porch light flickering like a dying pulse. Door hung ragged by a single screw. Inside, chaos. Drawers eviscerated, couch foam snowing the floor. Evelyn's angel statue face down, wing severed. Above, a bylaws sheet circled in red, Section 5.18, immediate revocation of property rights, with scrawled capitals, "This isn't over." Police logged misdemeanor vandalism. They left me in a blizzard of shredded photos. I boxed angel fragments, blood pinpricking my palms, placed them on Evelyn's recliner, then stared until dawn cracked gray. Morning mail punched harder. County envelope with notice of pending lien foreclosure. $18,450 fines, interest compounding, auction threat in 60 days, filed 2 days before Karen's meltdown. E-signed, Acting President K. Whitmore. Half the street received identical bombs. Her suspension hadn't cut digital access. She'd salted earth on the way out. Cassidy sensed carrion. Porch interview, rain drumming rail, recorder blinking. "This is lien stack extortion," she snapped. Front page Sunday. HOA horror show. Seniors face homelessness after president's power bender. Q flood, Jacksonville news van, camera panning chalk ghosts, busted gnome cemetery, my boarded door. State senator retweeted labeling Pine Grove ground zero for elder abuse reform. Legal aid nonprofit offered injunctions pro bono, donations cascaded. Karen's Lexus vanished. Mail stuffed, newspapers molding. But credit searches revealed she'd leveraged HOA liens for personal loans, fronted by a predatory lender 2 towns east. Fraud territory. We weren't facing a meddling matron, we were staring at white-collar larceny. We weaponized paperwork. George digitized every letter. Mrs. Thomason's niece looped the state attorney. Cassidy funneled leaks to an investigative podcast. Downloads exploded. My days blurred. Affidavits, signatures, conference calls, while nights rang with guitar chords drifting over driveways like homing beacons. Karen stayed silent. No car prowls, no midnight lenses, just a vacuum that smelled like brewing trouble. 3 dawns later, a city code compliance truck arrived, strobes slicing fog. 2 inspectors served a condemnation warning. Anonymous photos of standing water and structural rot. The photos were my burglarized living room, faucets Karen left running. Condemnation meant forced relocation, perfect partner to foreclosure. But the inspectors faced a firing squad of cameras. Ours, the ledgers, Channel 7's live stream. I produced time-stamped police reports. Cassidy narrated as viewership spiked. The inspectors' faces drained when they realized they'd been pawns. They retreated, promise of an internal review trailing behind. Across Florida, screens lit with clips. HOA tyranny. Watch neighbors outsmart fake condemnation. Donations quadrupled. A retired judge emailed offers of mediation. A class action attorney volunteered. The county commissioner called to apologize on speakerphone, voice trembling. Karen had thrown her last grenade, and it exploded in her lap. That night, under a sky finally rinsed clean, I placed the patched angel wing beside Evelyn's photo. I strummed "When the Saints Go Marching In." Neighbors emerged in slippers, forming a ragged chorus. Laughter floated. Genuine, whole. Even Mr. Diaz sang, words broken, melody perfect. We hadn't won yet, court still loomed, but Pine Grove stood shoulder to shoulder, stronger than bylaws or liens. And Karen? She'd become a cautionary tale told under porch lights. Because when greed mortgages a community, it forgets seniors spent decades learning endurance. And endurance, once lit by righteous anger, burns longer than any bullying spark. Tomorrow, depositions. Tonight, music swelled, and for the first time in months I slept without peeking through blinds, knowing dozens of porch cameras and a choir of neighbors watched the night for me. The storm clouds were gathering, not just in the sky, but in the air between us and Karen Whitmore. Pine Grove was no longer a neighborhood, it was a battlefield. By the time the final showdown began, every resident was armed with something. Laminated evidence, camera footage, or decades of pent-up grievances. But no one, not even Karen, could have anticipated how this story would end. For days after Karen's meltdown at the HOA meeting, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of light outside my window set my nerves on edge. Karen's absence from the community was not a relief. It was an omen. She had gone silent, but silence from Karen was louder than any of her tirades. The evidence against her was mounting. Cassidy Rayburn, the reporter from the Saint. John's Ledger had turned Pine Grove into a media hotspot. Her articles painted Karen as the tyrannical queen of an HOA gone rogue. Neighbors who had once cowered in fear of her retribution now came forward with stories that made my blood boil. Mrs. Thomason showed me photographs of her garden, destroyed by Karen's beautification initiatives. Mr. Diaz's grandchildren drew a picture of the sun in chalk on his driveway, only to have Karen wash it away with a hose, yelling about property values. The stories were endless. Then, the storm hit, both literally and metaphorically. It was a Friday night when it happened. I had just finished drafting another affidavit for the class-action lawsuit we were building against Karen. The rain pounded against my windows as if trying to warn me. I heard a noise outside, a soft, almost imperceptible rustle. My heart raced as I grabbed a flashlight and opened the door. My porch was in chaos. The rocking chair Evelyn had loved was toppled, its legs splintered. A bucket of paint had been dumped over the steps, oozing down like a grotesque waterfall. And there, nailed to the front door, was a sign, "Traitor." The letters were carved into the wood, jagged and deep, as if whoever had done it was consumed with rage. I stepped back, my hands shaking. My phone buzzed with a notification. Motion detected on front porch. I opened the security app to see the live feed. The video showed Karen's silhouette retreating into the shadows, her umbrella barely shielding her from the storm. She looked back once, her face illuminated by a lightning flash. Her expression was pure malice. The next morning, the fallout began. The county sheriff arrived, responding to my report of vandalism. But Karen had been careful. No fingerprints, no witnesses. The only evidence was the footage, and even that was blurry and inconclusive. "We'll keep an eye on her," the deputy promised, but his tone betrayed his doubt. Then came the liens. Official letters, stamped and sealed, arrived for half the neighborhood. They cited obscure bylaw violations, grass too tall, paint too faded, trash bins left out too long. Each fine was astronomical, designed to crush us financially. My own lien was the worst. $18,450 for unapproved renovations and non-compliance with HOA standards. The renovations in question? The broken porch light Karen had smashed and I'd replaced. Neighbors rallied. Cassidy's next article went viral. HOA president weaponizes bylaws against residents. News vans lined the streets, their bright lights cutting through the gloom. But Karen was nowhere to be found. Her house sat dark and silent, the blinds drawn tight. She was hiding, but she was still pulling the strings. Then came the surprise. It was a week after the liens were issued when George knocked on my door, his face pale. "You need to see this," he said, holding up a stack of documents. "Karen's been borrowing against the HOA's accounts. Personal loans, mortgages, she's in deep." I stared at the papers, the numbers blurring together. "How did you find this?" A friend at the bank, George admitted. But that's not the worst of it. She's using our properties as collateral. If she defaults, we lose everything. The weight of his words crushed me. We have to stop her, I said, before it's too late. That night, the neighborhood gathered in my garage. It was standing room only, the air thick with anger and determination. We planned our next move, dividing tasks like a military operation. Cassidy agreed to leak the financial documents to her contacts in the state attorney's office. George and Mrs. Thomason organized a petition to remove Karen from her position permanently. And I prepared for the inevitable confrontation. It came sooner than expected. 2 days later, a black SUV pulled into Karen's driveway. 3 men in suits got out, their expressions grim. They entered her house without knocking, and an hour later, they emerged carrying boxes of files. Karen followed, her face pale and tight, her hands clutching a single leather briefcase. She didn't look at the neighbors who had gathered on the sidewalks, whispering and pointing. She climbed into the SUV and it drove away. The silence she left behind was deafening. But it wasn't over. It never is with someone like Karen. As the SUV disappeared around the corner, I felt a chill run down my spine. This wasn't the end of her reign. It was just a new chapter, and I knew, deep down, that she would be back. That night, I sat on the porch with George and Mrs. Thomason, the remnants of Evelyn's angel statue resting on the table between us. She won't stop, I said. Not until she destroys everything. Then we won't stop either, Mrs. Thomason replied, her voice steady. Not until we win. The battle for Pine Grove was far from over, but for the first time, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: hope. Together, we would stand against Karen. Together, we would reclaim our community. And together, we would ensure that Pine Grove was no longer a battlefield, but a home. The storm outside had finally passed, but the storm within was just beginning. The storm clouds were an ever-present reminder of the tension gripping Pine Grove. Karen Whitmore's reign of terror had transformed a once peaceful community into a battleground of nerves, defiance, and unspoken fears. The standoff between the residents and the tyrannical HOA president had escalated to such a degree that every porch light seemed to flicker with defiance, every wind chime a whisper of rebellion. By the time the final clash came, it wasn't just Karen who would be changed. It was all of us. In the days following Karen's infamous outburst at the HOA meeting, the atmosphere in Pine Grove was electric with both dread and determination. Her sudden disappearance from public view didn't feel like a retreat, but a tactical move. The silence that followed was the kind that made every knock on the door, every shadowy movement outside, seem like the harbinger of some new chaos. For me, the unease was nearly unbearable. I'd catch myself staring at Evelyn's empty rocking chair on the porch, expecting it to creak ominously. A ghost of happier times turned into a harbinger of despair. Cassidy Rayburn's relentless reporting was shedding new light on Karen's history of abuses, stirring the pot even more. With every article she published, Pine Grove's residents found courage in their shared outrage. Photographs, videos, receipts, they flooded Cassidy's inbox like an avalanche, each new revelation adding to the growing dossier of Karen's villainy. The stories were as varied as they were horrifying. Mrs. Thomason's painstakingly nurtured flower beds, ruined under Karen's guise of landscaping improvements. Children's simple chalk drawings erased with Karen's cruel reprimands. Each story made Karen's absence more sinister. When the storm finally broke, it was both a literal and figurative deluge. The weather outside mirrored the rising tensions, lightning flashes illuminating Karen's darkened windows like a scene from a horror film. Friday night was the moment it all began to collapse. I had been poring over affidavits for hours when the sound of something heavy being overturned on my porch snapped me into action. The image that greeted me was a scene out of a nightmare. Evelyn's beloved chair lay shattered, a bucket of paint smeared grotesquely over the steps. The word traitor carved into my door sent a jolt through me, a message not just of anger but of deeply personal vendetta. My phone buzzed with an alert. My security cameras had caught movement. My breath caught in my throat as I replayed the footage. Karen's figure, shadowy but unmistakable, disappeared into the storm, the wind carrying her umbrella like some macabre accessory. Her malevolent gaze, caught for a split second by a flash of lightning, was burned into my mind. The aftermath was swift and chaotic. The sheriff's visit the next morning offered little consolation. Karen's cunning ensured there were no fingerprints, no smoking gun. Meanwhile, her retaliation reached a new level of cruelty. Neighbors began receiving envelopes bearing the HOA's insignia. Each one contained exorbitant fines for infractions so trivial they bordered on absurdity. My fine of $18,450 for so-called unapproved renovations was not just financially crippling, but insultingly unfounded. The community rallied like never before. Cassidy's expose about Karen's misuse of HOA bylaws became a sensation, sparking outrage far beyond our little neighborhood. Yet even as news vans crowded our streets, Karen's house remained a fortress of darkness and silence. Her absence only fueled the tension. It was George who delivered the bombshell revelation that changed everything. Karen's financial dealings were not just unethical, they were catastrophic. She had leveraged the HOA's assets, including our homes, as collateral for personal loans. If she defaulted, we would all pay the price. What followed was a whirlwind of late-night meetings, frantic phone calls, and carefully coordinated plans. Leaked documents made their way into the hands of authorities. A petition circulated with astonishing speed, gathering signatures demanding Karen's removal. The climax arrived 2 days later when an unmarked black SUV rolled up to Karen's driveway. Watching her being escorted out by stoic officials, her briefcase clutched tightly, felt like a small victory. But as the SUV disappeared into the horizon, a collective shiver ran through Pine Grove. We knew better than to think this was the end. That night, as we sat together under the faint glow of porch lights, there was a sense of quiet resolve among us. Karen might have been gone for now, but her shadow loomed large. Pine Grove's battle for peace and justice was far from over, but for the first time, it felt like a fight we could win.